Craig here for another edition of Now Age Conversations. I'm here with Dwayne Booth, also known as the political cartoonist, illustrator, Mr. Fish. Hey, Dwayne.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
So your work is published at Truthdig. It's a weekly at Truthdig, truthdig.com.
It's whenever I want to give them stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so now we've struck a deal where I'm going to give them almost everything that I do that's appropriate for Truthdig. It's not going to be everything that I do, obviously, but it's going to be pretty steady.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I found out about you. I mean, I've been a regular reader of Truthdig for quite a while, and it's always nice when your stuff comes up. And I never really look behind it and say, oh, okay, I like his perspective. And then when I saw you on with Chris Hayes, I guess it was on RT. I'm sorry,
right.
Chris Hedges. It's funny. I was just writing something about Chris Hayes, so his name was in my head.
Right.
No, those are two different guys.
Yeah.
That's something else we can get into. And it said, something, you're somebody I wanted to talk with. Listen about some different topics that you were getting into with Chris. First of all, your latest illustration is I'll put it here in the video when I put it up. But it's a picture of Donald Trump lying, grabbing his nuts, and it says Jesus coming back, but only for a minute, and then leaving again. Which is actually quite funny. And it's that kind of thing that is nowadays so inflammatory. But I remember a day when I was growing up that was kind of normal. Sort of political commentary and cartooning. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of got into this field and how it's become so controversial to say to even something like that, where that wouldn't get picked up in a regular newspaper?
Yeah. Let me begin by talking about how I started. I never wanted to be a cartoonist. I never wanted to be comment on politics directly with my art. I dropped out of college to become a playwright, a sort of a dangerous philosopher, much more literary than using art. I've always drawn, so it was never anything that spectacular to me. It was just something that I always did just for myself. And after I dropped out of school, I found myself taking notes by drawing the images. I was writing jokes and humorous scenarios. So rather than try to figure out how I was going to word the joke, I would just draw it quickly and then toss it into this, off to the side. Mm-hmm. And this was the Reagan years, actually. So I was, it was easy during the Reagan years, that's when politics became so simplified and cartoonish that it was easy to engage with them, So I was reading Mother Jones and magazines like that, and I started to look at the cartoons that were in there. And they didn't seem to be doing what I thought they should be doing. All the conversation was political conversation, and there was no humanitarian conversation or anything that reflected the messiness of peopleness, right? So I started to draw cartoons using political figures, also tossing them off to the side. And then I ended up with a stack that I said, I should do something with these, and sent them out, and immediately got published in a magazine called Anarchy was the first magazine. Mm-hmm. And then right after that, Harper's and then legitimate mainstream magazines started to publish me. And to answer the other question about how that is considered to be inflammatory and maybe inappropriate in some way, I guess. You're right. You and I probably have the same sort of memory of when magazines and newspapers were much more daring. They were able to have satire that tested these boundaries. And now it is a little bit. The industry has shrunk so much that there's so few political cartoonists. Very fewer than 10 who can support themselves by doing that alone, for sure. So what you end up with are people who want to get published, who are there going to pull their punches. They're going to pull their punches. They're going to be a little bit softer in their criticism, so they can sort of get into the very small number of mainstream publications that will occasionally run a political cartoon. Or you'll be extremely daring because we have the internet now, and you will go as far as you want to go. Are you a cartoonist then? Are you an artist? I mean, the fact that you're creating art, I would say, says that you are. But other people would need to judge you in accordance with your ability to make money. Is it a livelihood?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, this whole notion of that. You know, I recently did a photo essay, and it was about these mannequins behind glass windows, because I thought it showed the state of neoliberalism in a way that I couldn't get across before. The subjugation of oneself to the marketplace. Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's something that, yeah, I mean, we're probably close to the same age. I mean, Reagan was my first election. I saw when that happened, you know, it's just how this turn started to take place. And that what people seem to be so shocked now with Trump. I was shocked when I was 20, you know. I'm you know, I mean, I'm not even surprised. I mean, I'm not happy, but I mean, I'm not shocked or surprised. I mean, I saw this trend coming a long time ago, probably as you did. What's interesting now, and what I also take from you, is that, you know, what Trump is now is calling the press is the enemy, you know, and he blocking the Times and CNN and other news outlets from the White House briefing, and now he's not going to attend the correspondents' dinner. That's a whole great subject in itself that I want to write about, because I think, you know what, he doesn't belong at the correspondents' dinner. But to me, it's a result of this divide and conquer that the parties have been playing for, like, identity politics for so long now, that people feel like in order to hate Trump, you have to love the press. In order to hate Trump, you have to love the Democrats, and vice versa. My take is that they're all the enemy at this point. And I don't know if that's a similar take that you have, but can you just talk about that kind of mix of it? What's going on now with kind of parading the press as the enemy, when the press is totally corporatized, in line with what you're saying as far as just trying to get published?
Yeah. How do I want to approach that? I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, just even getting back to what I said when I wanted to get into the profession, it was true then. It's so much like sports. You know, to argue your own virtue by just attacking the other side is no demonstration of your virtue, right? And that's been the game, just as far as politics go, forever. But also, a lot of political cartooning was doing that too, and that is, to me, is a huge waste of time. And so, addressing how it is now, you know, vilifying the press. The fourth estate is supposed to have access, right, in order to report what's going on to the people, so they know, so they have the information, then can make intelligent judgment on the folly of politics, right? I don't know what the responsibility of, maybe the idea is just changing what the definition of what the press is, because there are people who are interested in finding the facts of the matter, right, and will attempt to report it honestly. There's citizen journalists everywhere. Anybody who has a phone is capable of sort of having some opinion. So I guess that now, since the structure of news gathering and reporting is changing so much, I guess we just have to sort of redefine what our responsibility is as citizens. I mean, I guess that's the one positive thing you could say is coming out of the Trump situation, is all of a sudden people are starting to realize that they've been asleep forever. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, what kind of a democracy? It's not really a democracy. Voting every 2 to 4 years is not being politically engaged.
No,
right?
Not at all. No.
And so we end up with this situation that is such where it's just like, hey, wait a minute, I voted for this other person. I was engaged and I gave a crap about how this was supposed to end up, and it didn't end up how I thought. What went on? It's just because nobody's been engaged and being critical along the way. So everything's been allowed to remain simplistic. What better tyrant to have in a society that has been reduced to this simplistic level. You have somebody who operates like that. You have a child.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, one of the things you talked about with on Chris Hedges' show is this Saturday Night Live sort of affect that's going on, and I don't think I've watched it in 30 years. So I mean, I see what goes on only from the sense of my own commentary of seeing the clips and such, and that how it takes up. Here's the interesting thing: I don't have television, but somehow I know Alec Baldwin is Donald Trump, and I know all this other nonsense that the reason I don't have television, I don't want to know, but somehow it permeates everything.
Right.
And sucks up the oxygen, and it becomes the resistance when it's not. It's not resisting anything.
No, it's therapeutic, and I don't want to be the guy who's just like, is going to slam Saturday Night Live. I just want people to recognize Saturday Night Live for what it is and what it's capable of doing. When people start to look at Alec Baldwin's parody of Trump, and think that A, that's political, and B, their reaction to it is political, then that's where the danger is, right? Because the real, true satire and the art that I tend to try to create, I would much rather, and this is the Trump getting kicked in the balls cartoon aside, I want to demonstrate how villainy manifests in the real world. I want to show what the victims look like. I want to show what the pain looks like. Because to me, that's what real satire is. Real satire to me is something that, A, allows you the dignity of recognizing that you are right to not trust the government, to dissent, right? So you can have that. You can have a laugh in that. But you also need enough material inside the satire that you're creating to allow your viewer to hold on to some rage and to hold on to some pain, because that is what's going to get you politically motivated. Your sympathy for others, your empathy for people who are truly suffering. Because when you talk about the audience for Saturday Night Live, these are privileged people. Most of these people are just it's the white privileged people who think that they are being political by laughing at this burlesque. Right. But when it comes to really affecting change, and the people who are victimized, immigrants and people who are being directly affected by these policies, they're not just being like, oh, thank God for Saturday Night Live. Because in many ways, it stops people from taking that extra step and becoming politically active, because it's making them assume that they're actually doing enough by being clued in.
Right, and it sucks up the space. I mean, I know you say you don't want to be the person who's bashing it. I actually do plenty of that. I have an alternate column I write called "Term Limits for Celebrities," saying that that celebrity culture, and I try to be do with satire and some humor. But the truth of the matter is that it's an infestation. It's a real infection of the culture. And I just published a piece about Rachel Maddow, the sort of newscaster celebrity phenomenon problem. When these people go on to become bigger than life, we give over our discernment as citizens to to these larger than life characters. So yep. So what gets lost in there is our own power. I was just joking on Twitter before that if I don't watch the Academy Awards tonight, I won't be able to get my marching orders from Meryl Streep about how to be tomorrow.
Right. And that's true, and I agree with you in the sense, as a broad analysis, that's 100% right. When I say I don't want to bash it specifically to people, what I'm saying, I recognize that there is a line. Okay, we have this line where there's people who are completely unradicalized and inactive, and then there's people who are engaged. If Saturday Night Live can move somebody along this line to somewhere here, then it's up to other forms of entertainment or just information to get them further down to where they are radicalized and they are affected. So that's the only reason. It's just, I do find the celebrity culture absolutely nauseating, and I don't watch television. I don't even have television. I have Apple TV. So I select what I see, and it's very, very very small. But at the same time, one thing I listen to right-wing radio whenever I'm driving, and people think I'm a masochist, but I mean, I think it's really important to recognize the level of shallowness that I'm cartooning against.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also, we can't live in an echo chamber that only reinforces our own beliefs.
Yeah.
I talk to people. My own landlord here in my apartment, he put signs up on the building for Trump. I said we live in Trump Tower. I said, but the guy's an older guy, 80-something immigrant guy, and you're kind of set in his ways, very proud about Trump. And you want to know something? I talked to him. I love the guy. The guy's a sweet guy. I connect with the guy. He's another human being. I don't look at him and say he's the enemy.
Right.
Right. I'm all the time trying to listen to people who have alternate views than me. And say, so maybe I could learn something, but if I don't give these people the benefit of a voice, of a listen, then how can I demand the same?
Right. Yeah, it gives you a strategy on how to deal with these people, and also to recognize where they're getting their news. Because I just heard last week on one of those right-wing stations that the language is such where it's the guy on the radio, he said, all right, so finally, a number of these climate scientists finally have admitted that they've been cooking the data, right? And I'm like, oh, interesting. I didn't see that anywhere. And what he said that they finally admitted that the temperature of the ocean is not rising. So what they were actually doing was they were lowering the thermometer into the water, and it was recording the heat from the engines on the boat.
Nice.
And which I love, because it's just like a Bugs Bunny routine.
Yeah.
As if scientists are like lowering and trying not to hit the propeller with the thermometer, and then reading the red on the hey, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, this really, to me, gets to the crux of the issue here, that the dumbing down of the population, intentional dumbing down through media culture over the past, couple of generations, we could easily say since, the early 80s, or pick a time, doesn't really matter, but, we know what the effect, the sort of homogenization of thought, where I live in South Florida, West Palm Beach looks like Lincoln, Nebraska. Have the same 3 stores and the same shopping malls and the same looking people. Everybody looks the same and speaks the same now. We have no diversity anymore. That has been obviously this commodifying of people. It's easier to sell them stuff, easier to control.
Right.
And, so I don't know how then, we talked about, if Saturday Night Live can move the needle. I'm not that, hopeful that people are able to get it at that point. In other words, I think now what you're trying to do through activist art, call it that, may help to actually move it in a way that this sort of grandiose celebrity stuff is just reinforcing the stupidity.
Right.
I've been writing about these issues for a long time, but like I said before, it wasn't until the people looked at my these photographs in connection with an essay about neoliberalism that they said, "Oh wow, I can see that."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Wow, imagine that." All of a sudden, when you put an image to it or something that actually allows them to, then they feel it. They see a face or something happens, and then there's all of a sudden some connection.
Yeah, and one other thing too that is missing, and let me know if you agree with this, is that one of the strengths of satire, and probably one of the strengths of being intellectually viable and useful, is piggybacking off of certain other ideas and notions that have been figured out by previous people and been demonstrated in real life and in real society. Mm-hmm. Because I teach, and I'll be talking about something and go off on a tangent, and then I'll mention the Beats. I'll mention Kerouac. Mm-hmm. Then I'll ask, does anybody know who that is? And nobody knows, right? And then, I'll mention, Kissinger, I'll mention nobody knows. But even as recently as Chelsea Manning, mm-hmm. You know who that is? Nobody knows. You're looking, and it's just like, what is going on? Just to speak to what you were saying, what information is being told to people in younger people, like people who are becoming, they're politicized, and now they're getting into the point where it's going to be their society, right? And they lack the tools of history and insight, because you're right. I think all of the conversation has gotten so thin, and the corporatization of all of this is while I recognize what you're saying about the consumer, yeah, in many ways you also have to look at the dissemination of art as well, because where before artists, when there was a viable middle class, you could just make sandwiches or serve coffee at a coffee shop and support yourself in say Greenwich Village or something, or one of these hubs, and create your art, right? And it was a romantic idea that you may never get sold, you may never do anything. But John Coltrane didn't start playing, the horn because he wanted to make a record, right? So these explorations that are not rewarded in society, people aren't able to take them anymore. And the people who are deciding to become artists, because the only real viable way that it's being told to them on how to get their art into the public square is through a corporation. Corporations are what disseminate the art now. And what do corporations, how do they view audiences? They don't view them as audience. They view them as consumers. So the model all of a sudden is presenting a idea that has some controversy to it or some even newness to it. It's not what you do. That's not a good business strategy. You dumb it down and you make it as recognizable to the dimmest wit on the block so that he or she will buy it. What does that do to the ideas that you're working on? It flattens everything.
Yeah.
So that therefore you can't have intelligent conversation because the alphabet for it has been completely castrated. It's been completely stripped of viability because the only people that are willing to pay you and help you disseminate your art are not interested in something that is new and contrary to the corporate model.
Yeah, you teach younger people, or what?
College. I teach at University of Pennsylvania and at Barnard.
Okay, so yeah, my daughter's a millennial. She's just graduating, undergrad this spring, and my sense about this generation is that they are more willing to look askance at capitalism, at corporations, at all these models that we're sort of so tied into at our generation that it's hard for us, not to to think about how do we get out of this, Right. They're choosing. They're not buying homes. They're not buying cars. They're making all these choices that are wisely, in many cases, not tethering them. What I wonder, maybe we can kind of close off on this point, when you see about with young people, because I think that this generation sees the situation at hand. They see what the other generations have left them, and they are willing to take a risk because they know that a risk is all that they have. So, how do you see that now playing in, sort of in contrast to what you said about the limitations?
Well, I might word it differently as far as how you describe basically how the younger generation or the generation that is coming of age now interacts with reality. I think that the technology is such now that information and understanding information it moves much quicker, and there's no reason to have deep contemplation about anything anymore. There really isn't. I mean, at one time, if you were curious about something and trying to get to the bottom of something intellectually, or trying to understand a historical episode that had some real ramifications, you would have to go to a library. You would have to read it in an actual paper book, right? And then there were places where you would engage with your friends, engage with other with colleagues or mentors at school to discuss this stuff and have it spoken out, right? And that's how you develop cognition for intelligent conversation and comprehension of how the world really works. Mm-hmm. I think because technology now allows somebody with just their phones, access to Wikipedia, why do you have to hold on to any information really? To test its viability inside internal conversations, right? You can't even walk down the street anymore without the distraction of having your phone.
Yep.
Or just calling somebody. Like, to have the presence of your own mind, to figure out the depth of your own mind, and to test your own beliefs constantly. I mean, do you remember that when you were younger? Like, when I was in college, and the reason I dropped out is because classes were a distraction. All I wanted to do was talk to my friends about what it all meant. What does all this mean, right? And to name drop, and to bring up all these historical examples about what people, and just try to move the ball that way based on previous movement.
Yeah, I mean, that happened. We would when I grew up, we would kind of walk in the woods and hang out in the woods, and we'd go, we'd be playing basketball on the court, and all that would just be another place to have these conversations.
Right.
Those conversations, I think they happen now, but they happen in, like I say, in a virtual environment. Something's lost.
At stake.
Yeah.
Nothing is at stake.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that makes me so mad about when we talk about Saturday Night Live and we talk about it used to be much more with The Daily Show, but shows like that that you could argue, like Jon Stewart was radical. You could say, wow, he's radical. He's got an opinion, right? Mm-hmm. Who cares? Who cares in the sense that where information used to go to a public space, a newsstand or something, right? So people were already congregated. It was already a mob, right? So you could feel political in real time with real people. That's a political situation. When everything is so virtual, it's a virtual reality that is bringing you either through your technology here or from your television. You're in your home hearing radical ideas. It's not going to motivate you to go out on the street. You can be as radical as you want inside the privacy of your own home, and the people, the state is absolutely fine with that.
Right. I've been making this case for decades that the problem is the television. And that these other devices are just extensions of that. But what I saw going on decades is still happening now. I go for a walk in the evening with my wife, and people are sitting home, and the screens have gotten bigger, and talking about resistance, I've just been pushing with what I'm running. Just resist the media. Get rid of your television. Forget about everything else. Everything else is so far down the line. You can't fix every other little problem. They're so big and so many. You're not going to stop every pipeline. You're not going to do any of it. Just start really easy. Disconnect from your television. And, I think 20, 30 years ago, I wrote about this little fantasy. So what happens? Somebody wakes up, average American, average Joe wakes up, goes and puts on the television, and no signal comes out. What does he do? He checks his things, checks his wires. Did he pay his cable bill? All blah, 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 blah. And then and his neighbor is having the same problem, and then nobody knows. Then finally, they walk outside, and they've lived side by side for 20 years, but they're just meeting each other.
Right.
This still is the problem.
Right. No, it is. I just love if we end up ending this by just being the old men that are just like, what the problem is, because that's what it starts to sound like, doesn't it? But I mean, there's a viability. I used to laugh at my parents for doing this, be like, "Are you kidding me?" But I'm starting to sound exactly like them. Yeah,
well, in my case, my grandparents, waiting in to cut that hair, but now, they got what their wish. It just it cut itself,
Right.
But so just to end off, where people can see your work besides Truthdig. So you've got a website, and where else are you showing your work?
Most everything that I do is going to be on clowncrack.com, which is where I throw everything and news of where I'm going to be and so forth, and books that I'm writing and just all of that. And Truthdig is like a place that pays me, and then outside of that, my stuff just is grabbed and disseminated absolutely everywhere.
Great. Okay, well, I'll make sure I link to that so people can see your work, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, anytime.
Great. Have a great day.
Yeah, onward.
Yep.
Thanks.
Bye.